Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Genre Equality Podcast on the Genre Equality channel. My name's Hitzir,
I'm Isa.
and if you don't know, we are the only podcast in Singapore that's monthly covering all the sci-fi, horror, supernatural, fantasy stuff that's going on all around the world, and we recap all the titles from the previous month, and that's what we are here to review. And it has been a quieter month than most,
Yeah.
but there are some big titles here and there, particularly with the debut of Demon Slayer's first feature film entitled Mugen Train. That will be our main topic. We'll also be talking about Brandon Cronenberg's. That's the son of David Cronenberg. He has a new body horror film called Possessor out as well. We'll be discussing about that. Plus, we'll be diving a little bit into Hulu's reboot of Animaniacs, Amazon Prime's Truth Seekers, created by Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, HBO Max's latest installment of Adventure Time Distant Lands, a hilarious body swap Blumhouse film called Freaky, and lots more, because Isa himself also is diving into the current, autumn season?
Yeah, but it's the autumn season of anime.
Yeah. The best of anime's autumn season, which includes Jujutsu Kaisen, which I know is a big deal out there, is getting a lot of hype, and plus a lot of other shows. I will be eulogizing the end of CW's 15 season long Supernatural.
Woo.
It's been a hell of a run, a bit of an end of an era. I've not kept up with all of it, but I was a fan, and I'm still kind of a fan. I keep up here and there, but I would like to talk about a little bit, like, towards the end, the legacy and impact of Supernatural, which
Mhm.
is quite significant, in terms of, like, the CW and the genre world at large, because a significant slice of fandom is from Supernatural.
Yep.
So I'll be talking about that right at the end. But let's begin with Demon Slayer Mugen Train, which is of course based on the immensely popular manga and anime series of the same name, Demon Slayer. It gets its first feature length film entitled Mugen Train.
Mhm.
It follows Tanjiro Kamado and his friends from the Demon Slayer Corps as they accompany Kyojuro Rengoku, the Flame Hashira, to investigate a mysterious series of disappearances occurring inside a train. Little do they know, the demon Enmu, the last of the lower moon demons and of the 12 Kizuki, is also on board and has prepared a trap for them. Now, it will be a bit of an understatement to say that this movie had a lot of hype going into it, as
Oh yeah.
evidenced by its record-breaking box office. This film single-handedly saved the Japanese box office in a COVID year with its blockbuster sales.
Mhm.
But in the end, sales aside, hype aside, our love for the series aside and the manga, did it live up to the expectations, or was the hype train, pardon the pun, derailed? What do you think about Demon Slayer Mugen Train?
I mean, it was a good movie. I
Mm,
think that of the modern big three that we have right now, right? That people are arguing for in the anime world, which obviously includes My Hero Academia,
mm.
to some extent Black Clover, and of course Demon Slayer. I think Demon Slayer is definitely the most recent one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's quite found its feet as far as the franchise goes for movies, right?
Mm.
So like,
Well, it's still the first movie.
yeah, it's still the first movie, so it may get better. Like, it's a good movie, but there were some things that were kind of lacking that I really enjoyed from the series that didn't quite translate. You know,
Mhm.
um, the hype was real. Like, people were hyping this up like crazy going into the whole thing. With like a immense like 15-minute fight scene, and some people claiming that it's probably the best fight scene,
Yes.
anime fight scene of the year, which is a huge claim.
Mm.
Given that the My Hero Academia one in January was also being hyped as the best fight scene of the year, so we'll kind
Mm.
of dive into the nitty gritty of that. But for me, I think like what Mugen Train suffers from is pacing largely.
Mm.
It feels a lot more like we discussed after we were done with the movie. It feels a lot more like uh, an extended 3 episodes, not even like 4 like compact episodes, but an extended 3 episodes, with an arc that plays out over those 4 episodes, but is limited by cinema time limit.
Okay.
Right. So like what we would have gotten over 4 episodes is shrunk down, into the, what's the runtime again?
2 hours, 1 hour 45 ish.
Yeah, so just like, so 117 minutes, just under 2 hours, right? Which is
Yeah.
fairly long for
Mm.
an anime movie.
Mm.
Yeah, but we didn't quite get all the things that I wanted to get. I think it was kind of all over the place, especially the final third of it,
Mm.
where we kind of get we kind of get some this whole like power level pegging thing that we need to kind of set up to continue the anime
Yeah.
series, but doesn't really make sense within the context of the movie. Did you
Yeah.
find that to be the same for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was personally a bit underwhelmed. But yeah, like you mentioned, first off, I felt that this could have worked as a 3 or 4 episode arc, but like as a film structure, pacing was a bit disastrous.
Yeah,
Its first, second, and third acts really didn't flow together, and what happens in the climax, clearly not set up at all in the film.
yeah.
It's as if the movie ended and we just went to the next episode. But the story itself is not, I guess, hugely innovative beyond hitting all the notes that should satisfy fans,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
It attempts to hit like the pathos and character complexity of the series with some interesting dream sequences.
Hmm.
But they fell flat emotionally for me because they were too broad.
Yeah.
The villain was uninteresting as a person,
Hmm. Hmm.
and as someone who gives like, I mean, frankly, I give no shits about power level whatsoever.
Yeah.
I found that things that I look for, things like characterization and motivation and personality, were non-existent for the film's
Yep.
antagonists. And finally, in terms of animation, I've seen UFO Table do better.
I agree. I agree.
So I was not as impressed as many people were. Not because it wasn't impressive, but because I've seen UFO Table do better. Lah. So in the context of their work,
Hmm.
this was okay. I mean, it was good, but it was serviceable. Lah.
Yeah.
Nothing special. Undeniably entertaining though. So if you're looking for like pure dumb, silly popcorn fun with familiar characters, I think Mugen Train should do it for you.
Yeah, if you're a big fan of Demon Slayer, right, there's no reason not to watch it. Like it really doesn't take away from the series. It doesn't add anything to the series. It's kind of like in a strange neutral place.
Yeah,
I think the decision to go for a movie is a little sad. Because for me, one of the biggest strengths of Demon Slayer thus far is the fact that they always manage to humanize the villains by
yeah,
giving us an appropriate backstory. Right. In this
yeah.
particular case, our supposedly main villain gets Jack. We don't get
Mm,
anything from him. We don't know where he's from. We don't know what his motivations are. None whatsoever. Right. In order to make
mhm,
space for the dream sequences that you've just mentioned.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if it had been episodic, right? If this had been like a small kind of like mini series on its own instead, would we have gotten that? Or
Mm,
was that planned for? I mean, I didn't read this particular arc within the manga itself, so I can't say for sure if it was something that could have been adapted that wasn't.
yeah.
Uh, you know, and like I would have very much rather not give me the epic fight scene and tell me a bit more about the villain they're facing, right? Because I think that's an integral part of the storytelling of Demon Slayer
Yeah.
in general. Also, like, yeah, it really annoys me. I'm okay. So, My Hero Academia's movies, right,
Mm.
have been problematic because a lot of them have no stakes.
Of course.
Because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
already know, right, that the kids are gonna be fine, they're gonna grow up and all of that. So they have no stakes, which gives the creators a fair bit of leeway to do like ridiculous things, right? Like you've got plot armor to no end.
Mm.
My main problem with Mugen Train is that it does not add anything to any of the major characters. The only person that we see having any sort of character development, uh, in air quotes, is Flame Hashira, right?
Yeah.
But even then, we don't get that much, And I was interested in his backstory. I was interested in his family life and all of that, sure. But what a
Mm-hmm.
waste of a good character
Mm.
to be killed off in the movie because we don't actually see any of him prior to the movie, in the series
Yeah.
itself, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think that's not a worthwhile sacrifice in terms of how the story goes, right? You want to raise the stakes, sure. You want to raise the power levels of everyone, Sure,
Mm.
you want to make it even more dire so people get hyped about the next scene of Demon Slayer and see what Tanjiro and the rest of them can do.
Mm.
Sure, but does it really need to be here in this movie per se?
Yep.
Right? Like the moment the movie gets off the train, right? I felt the movie should have just ended there, and I would have been decently satisfied instead of like
Mm.
utterly confused with what they're trying to do.
Mm.
Yeah. So.
Same, yeah, yeah. Like I mentioned, the ending sort of came out of nowhere. I don't understand. I mean, I understand what happened in the ending. I don't get me wrong, because it was simple.
Yep.
I just don't understand why it was there. It was just I felt it was just poorly written, like as a movie. Like it
Yep.
doesn't work as a movie.
Yep.
And I feel like this was just like a hastily cobbled together 3-4 episodes that were just edited together to make a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that for that reason alone, I don't feel like the movie works. With regards to My Hero Academia, what you're talking about, the lack of stakes, right? If you actually think about it, the series also suffers from a lack of stakes because it is told in flashback form.
Yep.
You already know that Midoriya becomes the greatest hero, etc., etc. Right? This
Yep.
is this is him retelling the story. Yet My Hero Academia achieves tension and stakes and character development too.
Yep.
So that is no excuse to not actually do a good story.
Oh
A
yeah.
good story
Yeah.
can still suck you in despite the fact that you know the ending.
Yeah. I mean, what the difference here is not so much that there's no stakes but good tension for Boku, My Hero
Mm,
Academia, right?
yeah,
My point is that Demon Slayer has no stakes and has no tension, and
yeah.
it adds nothing to the series except moves the plot forward,
Mm-hmm,
right? So like
mm-hmm,
they get one more mission, they get one more demon out of the way, they meet a new
mm-hmm.
demon. That's it,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
that. It like for all the fanfare around the movie itself, it doesn't progress the story as much as I think it should, right?
Yeah.
Whereas at very least, Heroes Rising that we got at the beginning of the year, at very least, that fills in a big portion of the My Hero universe or the My Hero
Mm-hmm.
story, a bit far into the future.
Mm,
A bit far into the future, yeah.
yeah.
And that in and of itself feels satisfying, right? Like at the end of the day, we are
Mm.
very invested in these long form anime series, anime stories, and I think like as an audience, we should be able to get that kind of like satisfaction of a return on our investment, you know.
This is more similar to the first My Hero movie, Two Heroes,
Yeah.
in which it takes place at a nondescript time, so we know like it doesn't really matter. It's of no consequence. It's just a side mission
Yeah.
thing. Oh, well, it is what it is. I did find it entertaining,
Yeah, for
just a
sure.
little underwhelmed because I don't understand what the hype was about after watching it.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. So how would you rate this film?
I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay.
Right, I still think it's very beautiful. I mean, like the kind of the scenes on the train and stuff like that, like there were portions of time where the animation was really kind of uneven, like
Yeah.
going with the whole like flash train thing, not the first time it's been done, not very interesting, not very visually stimulating.
Yep.
But then again, I would imagine that a lot of their time and effort and money was spent on the last fight.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I would similarly rate this a 6 out of 10. A perfectly decent, serviceable, entertaining film, but nothing more.
Yep, I agree. Agree.
Yeah. Anyways, let's move on to the second film that we'll be talking about on Genre Equality. It is called Possessor. David Cronenberg's son, who, by the way, was on the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, interestingly enough.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Cronenberg tries, or does he, live up to his father's body horror legacy with his gory and ghastly new sci-fi film. It is set in a cold world that blends futuristic tech with vintage aesthetic. Possessor is the story of a woman who gets into people's heads, literally. It is Tanya Voss, played by Andrea Riseborough, who is a contract killer, but she doesn't operate in a normal fashion.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she technically never kills anyone at all. Instead, she works for a company that has found a way to implant Voss's consciousness into others. Once hired for a job, she inhabits a subject's body, then commits murder for hire, and then makes an easy escape by forcing the subject to kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's the perfect crime, and Voss sort of has it down to a science. Voss is sort of thought of as the best agent in the business, but she's showing signs of instability. Her murders have become notably more savage, and she still longs for some semblance of a normal life with her estranged husband and child. Nevertheless, she accepts a new assignment requiring her to inhabit the body of Colin, who is played by Christopher Abbott, a young man about to marry into a wealthy family. What did you think of Possessor?
I was really taken by the opening sequence.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Excellent kind of first introduction to that. Uh, and then after that, for some reason, the whole film felt very muted to me.
Mm,
For some reason, right? And I'm not sure if it's the performances itself. I think a lot of it actually had to do with the fact that the film score is fairly one note, quite literally.
mm,
Throughout the thing, it's beautifully shot,
mm-hmm.
but I don't think Brandon Cronenberg is doing anything groundbreaking or new or even close to the level of what his father has done. Right?
Yep.
At no point in time did any of the body horror creep me out or get under my skin or even make me go like, whoa, that's something I haven't seen before. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting premise,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a premise that hasn't been done before, right? The
Mm-hmm.
whole body snatchers idea. I just don't think it was fully realized
Mm,
on the whole, right? Like I mean, most of the time when I'm doing horror or doing like especially body horror stuff, right? I
mm,
really tend to be very focused on like kind of what's going on. I was
mm,
drifting like a lot during this film. It took a fair bit for me to concentrate on what was going on.
mm-hmm.
Just because there were just a lot of these lulls, both
Mm,
in the action and in the dialogue and even in the kind of like visual flow of it that just lost me, I found myself like thinking about other stuff. Yeah, so all in all, like I think it's a very pretty film, right? For
mm.
something that's supposed to be body horror. Does it
It,
live
it's
up to the Cronenberg legacy?
mm.
Unfortunately, I think it's a valiant attempt, but nothing more than that.
Yeah, yeah. I think Possessor is, I mean, obviously not analogous, but somewhat similar to Hannibal in that it's too pretty to be gory.
Yeah,
It is bathed in a lot of blood and quote unquote gore and neon lighting, but it's filmed so beautifully, that you're more attracted to it than repulsed by it.
yeah.
Ideologically, I thought the film was interesting. It's about extinguishing humanity and embracing savagery. The philosophy is of cutting ties with the things that make you human and reverting back to the primal predator within. Lah.
Yeah.
So the depiction of the permeability of flesh, the malleability of identity, and the danger of losing yourself in another psyche is visceral and done well in kind of an ultra violent fashion.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, also like you said, nothing new. I mean, Black Mirror and tons of other identity or consciousness swapping tales have done this lah.
Yeah.
I think Riceborough is built as a star, and she's good as Voss, the killer struggling against her nature.
Yeah.
But the secret star of the film is actually Christopher Abbott because we see more of him, front and center.
Yeah.
It's kind of a tricky performance that requires the actor to be both his own character and Riceburgh's character inhabiting his
Mm-hmm.
body.
Yep.
So Abbott is at first cool and collected before descending into like this sweaty, desperate panic. I think the performances were good but not great.
Yeah.
And particularly what I do feel was special was the practical makeup effects and practical effects were quite good.
Mm-hmm.
It's very precisely calibrated to try to be disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like in the end, like it's kind of this neon soaked hallucinogenic trip that lacks action per se. But perhaps if it hits you, the nauseous mood will stick with you lah. It just didn't with me, but I was intrigued by the premise and the
Yeah.
idea behind it lah. The nihilist spectacle and the idea of emotional dislocation, which are themes I'm drawn to, but perhaps I've seen it done better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of exactly it, right? Like maybe not all the facets together in this particular way,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been like all bits and pieces of it have been done better elsewhere, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, so all in all, like it's not it's an interesting watch,
Mm-hmm.
It's really pretty, but like outside of that.
Yeah. So I'm rating this as 6.5 out of 10.
It's a 6 for me.
Okay. Yeah. I enjoyed it a bit more than Mugen Train, which is why like I picked it up a bit. But it's not super important for you to watch this.
Yeah.
But it is again an entertaining watch, and perhaps Brandon Cronenberg, still a very young filmmaker
I agree.
with a lot, an immense shadow to get out of. So perhaps, like, if he's given a chance to fully mature, maybe in his subsequent films he'll begin to find his footing lah. But right now he's still a baby filmmaker, and this is a decent effort from him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what he has 5 films under his belt so far.
True.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so like I think it shows promise, right?
Mm.
So we'll see, we'll see. There might be good things from him in the future.
Yep. And next up, I'm going to quickly dive into a section I like to call Quick Hits, where I talk about the various films and TV shows and other things that my co host may not have had the chance to watch.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm going to be reviewing a couple of big titles and some smaller ones. The first one I'd like to talk about is Hulu's reboot of Animaniacs. 22 years after it went off the air. Steven Spielberg's irreverent meta and clever animated sketch comedy show returns at Hulu. This new version smartly brings back the original voice actors Rob Paulson, Jess Harnell, and Tress McKenniel as Yakko, Wacko, and Dot.
Hmm.
With Paulson also doing double duty as Pinky, opposite the return of Maurice LaMarche as Brain, plus a few members of the old show's crew.
Yep.
But sadly, nearly all the other characters are gone. From Slappy and Skippy to the Warner's regular nemesis, the exasperated studio psychiatrist Dr. Otto. So I guess, how does this new version hold up? Unfortunately, it's not as zany as it once was, or
Hmm.
as the theme song implies. There's something missing with these new sketches. Contemporary America and current pop culture has so much to satirize and mock that you'd assume that an Animaniacs crew would have an infinite amount of jokes to make from it. So they do make jokes from everything from gun control to the very concept of reboots. Animaniacs, to their credit, is unafraid to tackle the controversial topics, even
Yep.
making fun of itself. Even though it is and was a show that is ostensibly made for kids. At its best, back in the day, it's silly enough for kids and witty enough for adults. This new version, damn, it tries lah, but it falls quite flat. The major reason is that I feel the show's original creator Tom Brugger and his team of writers were not invited back for this one. According to an interview that Rucker gave, quote unquote, they had decided to make the show, and by the time I even heard about it, they had a showrunner and a staff. So
Wow.
when his agent reached out to the new creative team, suggesting that they involve Rucker in the process, maybe as a consultant, maybe as a staff writer,
Yep.
even, they declined. They said, thanks, but we got this. The new showrunner is a Family Guy writer producer, Wesley Wild, and if you kind of know my disdain for Family Guy and its decidedly witless brand of bro humor that mistakes references for comedy, you can already tell that I wasn't going to enjoy this, so I didn't. This is a 4.5 out of 10 for me.
That's sad, man. I mean, like
Yeah.
Animaniacs is kind of okay. Why is Animaniacs kind of like ancestral in our mind, right?
Hmm.
As something that's like so funny when we were kids back then. And of
Yep.
course, like further watching later on, like the Prince joke is still one of my favorite.
Hmm.
To have discovered like much later on.
Mm.
But yeah, like why do you think it is that Animaniacs has been so important to a lot of people in our generation in particular?
Primarily because it was good lah. It's like The Simpsons, where it can entertain kids and entertain the adults at the same time. It had the nice, almost perfect balance of kiddie humor and adult humor,
Yeah.
and insights into contemporary pop culture at the time in the 90s. Making fun of all sorts of things in ways that were, not just funny and not, but also insightful. This particular version is more of they try to do the same thing.
Yeah.
They tackle the same topics and all of that, or they try to tackle the big topics at least, but doesn't have the same brains behind it.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't have the same sharpness and wit. Doesn't have the same voracious mind that can deconstruct and dissect such issues and make comedy from it.
Yeah.
It's a Family Guy. It's Family Guy.
So it's just they just reskin Family Guy with Animaniacs.
I mean, not particularly. It is still Animaniacs. They try to do it Animaniacs style, but it just comes across as like the same amount of wit that you would find in Family Guy, lah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. In the same way that Family Guy would never broach the genius of The Simpsons just because it never could.
Yeah.
And this writer couldn't broach the genius of Animaniacs. They just can't. It's sad. Unfortunately, I was super looking forward to it. One of the few reboots of the year that I was expecting to enjoy and really wanted to enjoy, but unfortunately I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And this coming from a big fan of Animaniacs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna be moving on to Amazon Prime Video's Truth Seekers.
Hmm.
Simon Pegg and Nick Frost team up yet again for this show. This Amazon series is a supernatural comedy about a group of part-time paranormal investigators who team up to uncover and film ghost sightings across the UK. They share their adventures on an online YouTube channel for everyone to see. So given the names involved, if you remember Shaun of the Dead, and Hot Fuzz and The End of the World, etc.,
Uh-huh.
you'd assume the comedy would be goofy, quirky, and filled with British wit. And yes, indeed it is. The ensemble is very memorable. But what is surprising and very unlike other horror comedies, like say What We Do in the Shadows, and the tons of horror comedies out there, right?
Yep.
It's quite a popular genre.
Hmm.
The thing that surprised me is that True Seekers is also more than funny, genuinely scary.
Really?
It has some terrific horror set pieces up its sleeves, alongside a very good comedy. The investigations that lead to the ghost stories, right, are tragic and poignant and startling and violent. The show is filled with warmth and wit and giggles, but can also be shockingly emotional and frightening when it wants to be.
Hmm.
The first half of the 8 episode season leans towards the procedural supernatural case of the week style, and really works. The second half opens up the story into more of a complex and serialized thing. Especially when the show reveals that its mysteries have been leading up to a big bad villain behind a huge conspiracy that involves mad scientists who've been experimenting on how to transfer souls and an ancient satanic book of magic. I must say that I prefer the first half over the second half,
Okay.
but both sides are quite funny and feature some of the cleverest British humor I've seen in a while. The camaraderie between the ensemble is actually quite endearing. Part of something that makes this work is that you have to like and want to watch the crew get together and solve mysteries, and they're really endearing. The chemistry carries the show, so I enjoyed this very much. Yeah, like it's nothing special. There's no depth or weight to it, but it's a very entertaining watch.
Hmm.
Yeah, like more in the vein of like a Wellington Paranormal, that kind of endearingness. But
Okay.
but if Wellington Paranormal was actually scary,
Okay.
um, so I'll give this a 7.5 out of 10.
All right. Cool. I'm definitely gonna check that out.
Yeah. Similarly,
Uh huh.
there is a new show from Netflix coming all the way from Egypt called Paranormal. And it's based on a series of supernatural novels by Ahmed Khalid Taufik. Paranormal is basically Egyptian truth seekers, because it also follows a ghost hunter, and it's also a supernatural comedy. It follows a bitter middle-aged professor named Rafa'at Ismail, who just seems to have the worst luck. He is evidence that Murphy's Law exists, and he is so cranky about it. Plus, he sees ghosts. The one thing that immediately drew me is this lead character and his acerbic use of sarcasm.
Hmm.
Imagine if Dr. House was a paranormal investigator, and you kind of get the picture.
Yep.
I expected Paranormal to be like a haunting story, but really it's more of an Arabic version of Supernatural set within the 1950s and the 1980s. And if you replace like the two handsome leads with a balding sack Arabian man in a grey suit and tie, you get Paranormal. Um, the big thing I didn't expect from Paranormal is the show's dark sense of humor. Like Rafat is hilarious. He carries the show. The structure of the series is very Ghost of the Week, similar to Truth Seekers and Supernatural and
Hmm.
the X Files, alongside with an underlying continuing story about Rafat's gift, his mystery, and his relationship with love interest Maggie, who also investigates the mysteries with him lah. So he has a crew. He has a long running mystery that ties together all the individual episodes. Very similar to True Seekers.
Uh-huh.
Definitely give this a watch. It's not the greatest ghost hunting show ever, but it's just as entertaining as True Seekers. So I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.
Damn. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So there's kind of
yeah.
like two shows, good shows in the same vein.
Yeah, two comedy ghost hunting shows, one on Amazon, one on Netflix. Very much in the same vein. So yeah, go check it out. Next up, I'll be talking about Adventure Lands, right? Adventure Time, Distant Lands. It is, it's one of to me, in my opinion, like Adventure Time is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, animated show out there. And it returned for a new mini series of 4 hour long specials entitled Distant Lands. This is a quarterly mini series, and if you recall, last June I reviewed its first entry centered around BMO, which I adored. This month, episode 2 is out, and it's called Obsidian. Best of all, it focuses on fan favorite couple Marceline the Vampire Queen and Princess Bubblegum, or Bubbline if you're one of the shippers.
Mm-hmm.
The special finds the pair meditating on the tumultuous relationship as they team up to defeat an old enemy, a fire-breathing dragon from the Glass Kingdom. While the perfectly pleasant BMO episode had fun with a character whose appeal was simply his cuteness, Obsidian dials in on one of the most complex relationships in the original show's entire 8 year run.
Mm-hmm.
After their kiss in the series finale, Obsidian homes in on what it's like for 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 the two of them to live a happily ever after. Like, what would their life look like?
Yep.
Getting together hasn't automatically removed the personality differences that kept PB and Marcy at arm's length for much of the show's run. And although the shots we get of their life together in domestic bliss are sweet, chill, and they're satisfying, Bubblegum is still somewhat of a tunnel vision control freak, and Marceline still has problems being vulnerable or exposing herself emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to the root of Marceline's issues is what makes this much more of a Marceline special than a Marceline and Bubblegum special. So this is more of a Marceline centric episode.
Oh, okay.
And voice actress Olivia Olsen once again does a great job capturing every angle of the character, from the punk rock princess to the wounded crooner, in both speech and song. Along the way, we get plenty of the usual lovely Adventure Time touches with see-through princess, who is the princess of Glass Kingdom. Is so goofy and what a great new character. And everyone in the Glass Kingdom is really really goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And it wins its place in the pantheon of weirdo who civilizations. The story itself taps all the right beats, even if it puts less emphasis on silly humor than Adventure Time usually does, and more on the emotional payoff and the emotional complexity.
Yep.
The series is typically an excellent approach to music is at its peak here. This is Adventure Time music at its best. The songs are just as good as ever, including an absolutely brutal ballad that features heavily in the flashbacks, showing how the Glass Kingdom and its issues led to Marceline and PB breaking up in the first place, and a moment that takes place before the Adventure Time show begins.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always been wondering about how they broke up the first time. So we finally find out that. And the emotional payoff I mentioned is sublime. Unlike the simpler BMO episode, Marceline has one of the most emotionally resonant stories across the entire run of Adventure Time, tied with and to the Ice King. So Obsidian flits back and forth across her centuries spanning existence,
Mm-hmm.
filling in a few key gaps that help explain the bratty, aggressive punk rocker we met nearly a decade ago. But critically, in having uncovered the roots of much of her pain, the special resists the urge to quote unquote fix her, and rejects the idea that she was ever broken in the first place. The finale episode, Come Away With Me, gave Marceline a happy ending, and a well earned one at that. But Obsidian satisfies by showing how she and PB are going to have to work hard to keep that happy ending, which is the perfect way to display what happens after the final kiss of the show. It's not always gonna be smooth sailing. So yeah, this is a great episode of Adventure Time.
Mm-hmm.
45 minutes, better than the BMO episode even. It's a 9 out of 10 for me.
Damn.
Yeah, highly recommended for if you're an adventure fan, of course. Adventure Time fan, of course. Next up, I'll be talking about Freaky. If you're a long time listener to this podcast, you know my absolute love for Christopher Langdon's Happy Death Day movies.
Mm-hmm.
Those films married the slasher and time loop genres together to create two of the most purely fun, purely funny movies I've seen in the last 10 years. This time, Langdon once again. He likes to subvert the slasher genre, and this time he marries it with the body swap genre. So this new film is a blood splattered twist on the freaky Friday franchise that dares ask, hey, what if a nice meek high school girl ended up switching bodies with a psychotic serial killer who looks like Vince Vaughn?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's bolstered by absolutely go for broke performances from Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton, as well as Langdon's sharp humor. This film is a very fun ride. Freaky doesn't skimp on the meat and potatoes of any good body swap movie.
Yep.
They have a ton of fun watching two different people awkwardly slip into their new corporeal figures and lives. Both Newton and Vince Vaughn dig into their new parts with gusto, and while the early scenes play a bit broad, the duo eventually settle into their roles with remarkable ease. The girl is named Millie, and she is a bit of a bullied girl,
Mm-hmm.
not used to being seen or respected. So she can't help but enjoy being stuck in Vaughn's body lah. As it turns out, people do listen to strong white men.
Yeah.
And the killer, who is nicknamed the Blissfield Butcher, delights in the anonymity afforded by Newton's form. Along the way, the pair discover more about themselves and each other, kind of, and accidentally solves a few problems for each other. The butcher's treatment of Millie's bullies and mean shop teacher and everything, it really takes the cake. They put on a masterclass of physical comedy while doing so. These people have range, and Freaky doesn't waste an inch of it.
Yep.
It's not without its flaws though. The backstory of the magical dagger used in the body swap is very muddled. I don't quite understand it, and the ending is something of an anticlimax considering the build up to it.
Mm-hmm.
So while it's not nearly as good or fresh or inventive as Happy Death Day, Freaky is certainly a movie that loves winking at the audience similarly. It's funny, it features an ample body count, a lot of gruesomely innovative kills, which is why I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. A very fun movie.
Nice.
Yeah. Next up, going back to Netflix, this is a film called His House. It is an impressive debut from British writer-director Remy Weeks, and it follows a refugee couple who make a harrowing escape from war-torn Sudan and find asylum in the UK. But as they struggle to settle into an English town, they find themselves plagued by a supernatural evil from back home. It's a seamless mashing of classic scary movie tropes
Mm-hmm.
with more profound horror of real world conflict zones, while also tackling issues of race and cultural displacement through the mesh of genre. His house engages with the legacies of tribalism, survivor's guilt, and the psychological scars wrought by genocidal atrocities. Although, of course, they face racism and xenophobia once they're in England as well. That's in the mix too.
Mm-hmm.
But these thematic undertones aside, the movie is also a very effective generator of jump scares and nightmarish imagery. Much of it achieved with relatively lo-fi special effects, mesmeric lighting, and intensely committed performances from its lead. It's such a surprising film that zigs when you expect it to zag. It slips seamlessly between the Sudanese language of Dinka and English, with lead actors Wunmu Mosaku, who also played Ruby in Lovecraft Country, and Sope Dirusu. They're both outstanding here, seemingly as stoic victims of a genocidal atrocity, but they have a history of dark secrets of their own, which is spurning the guilt and the haunting that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Ultimately, guilt is shown to be as a powerful generator of pain, as much or even more so than victimization. So, without spoiling anything, the ending recalls the conclusion of the Babadook, with a message about reconciling with your own monsters. Really, really good movie, a 7.5 out of 10.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah. Still keeping with Netflix, talking about Blood of Zeus now. Blood of Zeus is Netflix's latest adult animated series, and it's a mix of anime style visuals and Greek mythology. There have been a lot of takes on ancient Greek myths that it feels very tired by this point. And this show does something interesting by positing that this is a story of a lost chapter in Greek mythology. So it tells the saga of Heron, a commander who learns that he's a rejected offspring of Zeus, one of many,
Yep.
and must become ready to save the world from a demonic army. Heron's original story allows the series to feature many notable gods and figures, but it's not restrained by canon, so to speak. Because it's not an established story, so they can do whatever they want with it. So it's kind of like it has fun with Heron's ability to fight against the titans of Greek
Mm.
mythology, and the show can recontextualize what the audience thinks about these characters and events. That being said, I thought like the ideas and visuals and battle sequences are
They
ambitious,
are. They are.
but not executed or polished well enough to the point where like its reach exceeds its grasp.
Yeah.
It's also pretty bland when it comes to character work.
Uh-huh.
Everybody's motivations are broad and generic. That it's almost laughably simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of nuance leads to a lack of investment, and that's a major drawback for me. You do you catch a bit of this as well?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I finished it in the end, but it's just really one of those things that I put on in the background. I was so
Mm-hmm.
excited because it has the look and feel of what Castlevania kind of has been bringing to us for like 3 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the poster art, but we didn't
Mm.
really get much of that. Both in terms of characterization and in just of the overall like consistency of the artwork. You
Yep.
know, and I'm a big Greek mythology fan.
Yep.
And I just really didn't feel like it okay, it didn't have the visual flair that I wanted, didn't have the character development that I wanted, it didn't even dive that deeply into the mythology of it.
Mm-hmm.
So like overall for me, Blood of Zeus was pretty meh. All right. And I also think that's because personally there's there's been a game out called Hades, right?
Yep.
Which is this roguelike that is pretty mind-blowingly good.
Mm-hmm.
And like that is everything that I want, right? The artwork is great, the gameplay is great.
Mm.
The mythology is like it's got some deep cuts, lah. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
And it is everything that Blood of Zeus is not. So all in all, it's very meh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm rating this a 5 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, it's a 5 out of 10 for me. Like it's an easy watch, but not not,
Mm-hmm.
not much more than that.
Yeah, same. Totally agree. Next up, I'll be talking about AMC's new anthology series called Soulmates, which posits the question: what if there was a scientific test that could accurately identify the person you love most in your life,
Mm.
aka your soulmate? It is set 15 years into the future. The show explores what that technology could mean, and the people who take the test rarely get what they bargain for. It doesn't work too hard to explain how such a game changing technology became possible,
Yeah.
but instead it imagines what the arrival of a foolproof soulmate test would do to shift people's perspective on what true love means.
Uh-huh.
Particularly, it challenges those already in existing relationships, and it makes the world an irrevocably different place. Each of the 6 episodes focuses on a different story and set of relationships. It sounds like certain episodes of Black Mirror, and indeed, it was written by the writers of USS Callister.
Ah.
But the ones that work best are the ones that are least like Black Mirror. Take the first episode, for example, which is the best episode of the season. It's called Watershed, and it stars Sarah Snook from Succession and Kingsley Ben-Adir as Nikki and Franklin, a couple who have been married since they met in college and quickly, perhaps too quickly, become everything to each other. 15 years later, they're living in a world in which they have to go to a new soulmate wedding every weekend. Nikki finds herself kind of furious at the fact that her stable marriage has become a relic, like their marriage is happy.
Mm-hmm.
They've put years of hard work into making it work. They have 2 beautiful kids. They're perfectly fine. But now, seemingly, everyone around her starts taking the test and finding their ideal partner, and she can't be sure is this happiness all there is, or is there something more. The ensuing hour, anchored by a terrific performance by Snook, is painful and revealing, finding pockets of devastating insight tucked away in dark corners that neither Nikki nor Franklin have addressed in years. The soulmate test is the instigator, but the intimate drama of them, kind of poking the tender bruise of their marriage is as real as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
From there, soulmates kind of gets lost in the weeds of its ambition. Three chapters, the lovers break on through, and the power ballad of Caitlin Jones jump to the extreme ends of storytelling spectrum. They are a bit too genre-y. I know this is genre equality, lah,
Yeah.
but like they seem to focus more on concepts than character. And there needs to be a balance of both, because why would I care about such concepts? I mean, I know they're idea wise they're intriguing, but you know, it needs to have some real world application and emotional application to it
Mm-hmm.
lah. So yeah, they're not too impressive, you know, but there are two other episodes called Little Adventures and Layover that are really really good as well.
Yeah.
That focuses on relationship dynamics and really relies on the chemistry on the actors portraying them lah. So like all anthologies, this is a mixed bag, you know. The worst episodes range from 3 to 5 out of 10, and the best episodes range from 8 to 9 out of 10, with a Watershed being a 9 out of 10. So I would say that overall this is a 6 out of 10.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. In particular, episodes 1, 5, and 6 are very good because they dive into the minutiae of these characters and their dynamics.
Uh-huh.
Too often, sci-fi is, I think, too focused on macro implications, on religion, politics, law, philosophy, etc.,
Yep.
and not focused enough on the micro and the rich interior detail of these people. Soulmates works best on the micro level on episodes 1, 5, and 6, and I love that. So those are the episodes that I would recommend
Okay.
for you.
Okay.
Yeah. The rest of these, I'm just really gonna breeze through. Most of this is garbage. Um, the craft legacy is next. Nearly 25 years have gone since the cult classic. The craft, you know, tapped into a pre-Harry Potter fascination with the occult and wishes,
Yep.
giving teenage audiences a sense of how empowering it might feel for young women who are kind of persecuted by date rapey douchebags and openly racist prom queens to maybe invoke a little black magic in their desire to get even. Now comes the sequel helmed by Zoe Lister-Jones called The Craft Legacy. Unfortunately, this is a smart but way too safe PG-13 version of the late 90s punk favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Legacy is watered down, PG-13 reboot in which the outsiders are no longer treated as freaks, and their mission amounts to enlightening classmates and other assorted chauvinists about the risks of underestimating young women. Doing so could get you killed in the original Craft, whereas in this, the worst that can happen is maybe you wake up woke and spouting your newfound appreciation for Princess Nokia or the essays of Janet Mock or things like that.
Yeah.
The Craft is a great legacy, and this light as a feather, stiff as a board sequel is not it. It is a 2 out of 10. Next
Damn.
up, we're talking about Spell. Spell is the new horror movie that follows a bush pilot named Marquis who flies to his father's funeral in rural Appalachia. That's when an intense storm causes Marquis to lose control of the plane, carrying himself and his family. He awakens wounded and alone, trapped in the attic of a woman named Miss Eloise. Eloise claims that she can nurse him back to health with a hoodoo figure she's made from his blood and skin. Unable to call for help, Marquis desperately tries to break free from her dark magic and save his family from a sinister ritual before the rise of the Blood Moon. It's a pretty standard B movie gimmick where urban city folk are trapped in a rural area.
Yeah.
Except here, instead of homicidal hillbillies like Texas Chainsaw or whatever, it's the Appalachian enclave of black hoodoo practitioners. Overall, I think it's a decently stylish thriller with occult elements. Unfortunately, the stylistic efforts aren't enough to compensate for the predictable, cliche-ridden aspects of the screenplay. Plus, the movie walks an uneasy line between critiquing stereotypes and reinforcing them.
Yep.
And Spell is just too familiar, reminding you that there are way better movies in this genre, and it's certainly not aided by its confusing messaging. So it's a 4 out of 10 for me. Next up is something that could have been really good. It is called Jiu-Jitsu. It is the latest addition to Nicolas Cage's batshit bonkers filmography. The premise is this: every 6 years, an ancient order of Jiu-Jitsu experts they face a vicious race of alien invaders in a battle for the Earth. For thousands of years, the Jiu-Jitsu fighters that protect the Earth have won. Until now, That's when a celebrated war hero named Jake Barnes is defeated by Brax, the leader of the invaders. And so the future of humanity hangs in the balance. Injured and suffering from amnesia, because of course he has amnesia, Jack is rescued by Wiley, played by Nicolas Cage, and his team of Jiu-Jitsu fighters. They must help Jack regain his strength in order to band together and defeat Brax in an epic battle that will once again determine the fate of mankind. So look, while I admire Nicolas Cage's go for broke attitude, Nicolas Cage going nuts isn't a guarantee for a good movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get Leaving Las Vegas, sometimes you get Mandy, sometimes you get Color Out of Space, things like that.
Hmm.
But most of the time you get The Wicker Man or Bangkok Dangerous. And this is a case of the latter. Nicolas Cage's amusing turn as a martial arts expert who also fights aliens, who's also a hermit with a affinity for newspaper hats. Seriously, he makes them throughout the entire movie. That part is amusing, but this mostly feels like awkward in a bad way, where the campiness isn't campy enough and the fight scenes don't even deliver.
Oh
So
man.
it's kind of a hard pass. It's a 1 out of 10. Okay, down to the last two. Mortal is the next one. It's a Norwegian fantasy about a young man discovering that he has godlike powers straight out of Norse mythology. Um, the modest visual effects, which mostly consist of distant lightning bolts and gathering storm clouds, bring little excitement to this by the numbers movie, which follows the same tired beat as every superhero origin story you've ever seen.
Yep.
If you want to watch a movie that makes Thor to the Dark World look like a cinematic masterpiece, this is it. Mortal is a 2 out of 10. Give this a pass. Finally, I'm going to be talking about the Iron Mask, which is even more bonkers than Jiu-Jitsu. Um,
Okay.
this is, I mean, it could have been one of the most entertainingly terrible movies of all time. The Iron Mask stars Arnold Schwarzenegger uh, as a British naval officer with a British accent, and Jackie Chan. And it's a big budget blockbuster co-financed by Chinese and Russian studios.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a movie that exists, and it has dragons and magic and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jackie Chan fighting each other, and it has to be seen to be believed. It is set in 18th century Russia, China, and England, and it's an action fantasy adventure, which is apparently a sequel to a 2014 film called Forbidden Empire, which I didn't watch.
Yeah.
It follows the exploits of a cartographer named Jonathan Green as he undertakes a scientific and supernatural journey that leads him from England to China. It's just as it's kind of a swashbuckling romp through bad green screens and CGI, and a story that's so ridiculously nonsensical that it actually stops being amusing. Nevertheless, it has to be seen because it's one of the worst movies I've ever watched. Like, it's a 0 out of 10. So that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the wiki page. I typed in the Iron Mask and it tells me V2 Journey to
Yeah.
China, which is the original thing that it launched as.
Yes. It was built as V2 in China and Russia, but for I guess English audiences, it's been renamed the Iron Mask. And we don't know. I didn't know that it was a sequel. Apparently, it's a sequel.
Oh my god.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's British accent is as bad as you can imagine.
Yeah. Already, I mean, it's Arnold. Yeah, there's
Mhm.
nothing to do with that.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, you might want to watch this just because it's so bad. You might think it's good, as one of those like The Room type of Friday night adventures where you get drunk. But other than that, it's not really worth watching.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have any intention to.
Yeah, man. Anyways, next up will be well, actually, before we move on, any of the shows or movies that I mentioned that capture your fancy.
I think I'm probably gonna check out True Seekers. For sure.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan
Mhm.
of Simon Pegg and gang.
Mhm.
I saw the trailer for His House on Netflix
Mhm.
and I bookmarked it, but I haven't gotten to around it yet. I definitely want to check
Nice.
that out. Paranormal Adventure Time is definitely on the list as well. I'm probably gonna pocket Freaky for sometime when I need something kind of light and breezy.
It's very light and breezy. Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if I have enough time to do all of Soulmates, but it sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll
Yeah.
definitely do 1, 5, and 6.
Mhm.
And go through that. But yeah, I mean, Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know if I can do more Nicolas Cage. Like it. 2020 seems like a Nicolas Cage year. Like it's just been
Yeah.
that absurd.
Mhm.
But I don't think I'm going to be doing any of that. Yeah. Speaking of the
Yeah.
craft, what is up with our very poor with the very poor witch movies? Witches. which movies that have been coming out
I
recently.
think people were just trying to capitalize on Halloween. The craft came out, on November 30th. Obviously, we couldn't cover it for our Halloween episode
Yeah,
because it came out after we recorded. So a lot of people were just trying to cash in, like, what's good horror. Sometimes it's slasher, sometimes it's witches, sometimes it's monsters, and most of the time, it just feels like they wanted to fill up programming slots rather than actually make good stories. It's just a cash grab lah for Halloween,
yeah,
and this was it.
yeah. I don't know if we've gotten like, well, the witch is kind of a witch story. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, The Witch is definitely a witch story.
Yeah, the witch is
Yeah.
definitely a witch story, but like I was just trying to think of like when was the last time we got a good witch franchise actually.
Sabrina season 1 was pretty good.
That is true. That is true. We did give it some glowing reviews when it first came out.
Yeah, yeah. It hasn't lived up to its potential, but it was pretty promising for a while.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll be moving on to Ice's segment now. I think this is called Ice's Anime Corner, where he covers, well, or at least cherry picks the best of the current anime season. So, what do you have for us?
Yeah. I wish I could review everything, but like there's just so much. There's at least 40 to 50 titles that come out in any given season.
Wow.
I've basically divided this autumn season into two broad categories, right? So I'm going to talk about like notable returning series. So if you are
Mm,
a fan or something that we've already covered and or recommended, like it's back, or and first and foremost, just to kind of get it out of the way, because like we've already given this multiple stamps of approval, Haikyuu
mm,
to the top second season. Well, technically, it is the second half of the second season. It's back.
yeah.
All the good stuff. I'm not totally caught up with everything yet, but I mean, which episode was it? Hits. Which episode? Behold, was it that we're talking about Haikyuu?
A couple episodes ago, 34, if I'm
Yeah,
not
so if
mistaken.
you want to hear us like gush and rant and all of that about how great Haikyuu is and maybe one of the best sports anime of all time,
Mm-hmm.
please go ahead and check that out. But yes, just to let you guys know that it is now and it is currently airing, and we're about 6 or 7 episodes in.
Eight as of a couple of days ago.
Oh,
I just watched it.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So please, Haikyuu, good stuff. You can go and catch up on all the early Haikyuu episodes on Netflix.
Yeah.
Eh,
Otherwise, it's on Crunchyroll.
Oh, on Crunchyroll as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next, I'm going to talk about Danmachi, or is it wrong to try to pick up girls in Dungeon Season 3? So Bell, Crano, and gang are back, and this time around they are going into the dungeon again to find some fairly surprising changes that are going on in the world of Oratoria. So,
Mhm.
whereas Season 1 and 2 was kind of like a very light-hearted, breezy um, affair, I think season 3 is kind of delving into some very interesting questions. It's much darker and a much deeper look at the world building that has been set up for past two seasons.
Right.
Essentially, monsters are gaining sentience.
Hmm.
The monsters in the dungeon are gaining sentience, which has never happened before. And Bell is caught between several factions among the Godhood, who feel that monsters should continue to be treated as monsters regardless of their intention or their intelligence or their
Mm.
sentience,
Mm.
and between those that are fighting for kind of integration, right? So you can draw whatever parallels you want. I think in
Westworld.
yeah, Westworld, otherness, right,
Yeah.
racism, and all of that. Danmachi doesn't go into that kind of detail, but they're definitely upping um the ante just in terms of like the kind of stories that they're trying to tell. I mean, like a lot of
Yeah.
people tend to see Danmachi as a very mediocre anime, and for the most part it is. But for me, it's just like plain enjoyable, and I think it's an interesting turn of events for them to go in a direction like this and be a bit more serious with what they're trying to do.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Next up, it is the return of the irregular at Magic High School. This time around, it's called the Visitors Arc. For those of you that are unaware, I covered this a fair time back, and basically we follow a high school. Okay, so magic and science are basically now the same thing, right?
Mm.
Magic is a part of science, or magic is a form of scientific. Uh, I mean, basically they
Yeah.
scienced magic out, lah, right? So
Yeah. I
we
mean, magic is just science we haven't understood yet,
Yeah,
right?
so basically, in this particular world, in the future, we figured out how to um use magic in a much more scientific way, right? So which allows magic users to go to school and learn about how to go and cast spells, create spells, counter spells, and all of that. So the irregular basically is a high school student who has incredibly poor aptitude scores as far as the school is concerned, but
Mm.
secretly he's actually one of the most powerful magicians in the world. Like,
Right.
yeah. So he's a strategic class magician capable of taking out an entire nation by himself, but he's a high school student. So after a very promising first half of the first season, Irregular and Magic High School ended very, very poorly with kind of like this really rush 4 episodes where they closed the final arc in a magic war against like Chinese special forces that was horribly, horribly drawn
Oh wow.
and incredibly. It was very, very sad because like it was so promising up till that point. I'm not really sure what happened there. But
Mm.
they managed to salvage that with a movie that came out Halloween 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of mind blowing just in terms of like the animation and the amount of detail. Trying to just to make up for the horrendous affair, the last one. So they are back now, with a more interesting look, adding to the whole idea that magic can be scienced. We are adding extra dimensionality and demons. So that's been fairly interesting. If you are a fan of the world building and everything that has come before, I think the regular and Magic High School Visitor arc is a continuation of that and is worth catching if you're already a fan.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. Going to something else, Golden Kamuy season 3. If you guys
Mm.
haven't heard me talk about this is one of the most underrated anime over the last couple of years. You follow a Japanese soldier during the Hokkaido Gold Rush called the Imoto Sugimoto. In season 3 is a continuation of the story as uh he continues to try to collect pieces of a treasure map that are tattooed on prisoners' backs.
Hmm.
Yeah. So have do you remember me talking about this
Yeah. Yeah.
before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it's a continuation of that. Like again, the storytelling and the character development for this is constantly great. The animation and action sequences are also really, really good. But it's just kind of the way that the story has been developing over all sorts of twists and turns, all sorts of like politicking going on in the background while our two heroes are trying to find their way to survive and ultimately, find the treasure. And it's been
Mm-hmm.
really, really good. Um,
Okay.
I'm also going to talk about. Well, technically, this is a new anime, but I'm including it here because it's related to an old favorite of a lot of people, a
Mm.
classic. And I'm going to talk about Yashahime, Princess Half Demon, which is actually the sequel to Inuyasha,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which for a lot of anime fans is a classic. So Yashahime basically follows the daughters of Seishomaru and Inuyasha
Yep.
in an adventure that kind of spans like timelines, right? So basically, the two half demon twins, Toa and Setsuna, who are Seishomaru's daughters, get separated from each other. One of them gets sent to the future and is raised by a relative of Kagome,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one becomes a demon slayer in feudal Japan. Later on, the portal reopens and they are reunited. But the younger sister, who is in feudal Japan, no longer remembers the older sister whatsoever. So they basically go on an adventure, joined by Moroha, who is the daughter of Inuyasha and Kagome, to kind of reclaim their past that they've lost together, right? It is fairly fun and very interesting, and it has a lot of throwbacks to the original anime, the Inuyasha anime. And it's fun in that way. It's very similar tonally. Even the kind of like humor beats that they have is very reminiscent of that.
Oh wow. Okay.
Uh, to me, however, the animation is feels very, very dated. I mean, like obviously they're trying to stay true to what Inuyasha used
Looks
to
like
look
right.
like. But
Yeah.
it really does need an uplift in my opinion.
Huh.
So
Okay.
if you are a fan of Inuyasha and you would like to see the continuation of that particular story, because Inuyasha did get cut quite, yeah, the Inuyasha as a series didn't quite get finished, although the
Mm.
manga did. Please go ahead and check out Yashahime, Princess Half Demon. Again, this is a new anime, but I'm putting it in this category because that's how people know about it. I'm
Nice. Okay.
I'm also going to talk about the next thing is a Chinese animation called The King's Avatar, which is into
Mm-hmm.
their season two. I've covered this before, and basically it follows the ambitions of former pro esports players trying to make a comeback. Right. So
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah. So we follow Yechu, and his ambition of trying to go back to the pro league. I'll get back to the pro league of Glory, which is a massive online multiplayer game. After his kind of fall from grace and from the biggest team in the league, it is an extremely niche appeal, right? Like if you're into games and you're into kind of MMOs and all of that and esports, I think there's a lot of things to like about that, and it's just a continuation of story from season one. This production is backed by Tencent, so there's a lot of production value going on with that.
Nice.
But they do kind of skimp out on. It has a really really terrible opening song and ending song.
Oh, okay.
Uh, so it's kind of sad. I mean, okay, the ending song is not too bad, but the opening song is absolutely terrible. So I think they might have skimped out some money on that itself. But the
Huh.
animation is really, really good, and the fight sequences are some of the best, I think, when it comes to just this particular style of animation. It feels a lot like the Outcast, which is another martial arts Chinese animation that came out some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the King's Avatar, it's also a returning series. I'm quite enjoying it. They're going into all the little scheming things that they need to do behind the scenes. It's not just about like being on the stage and kicking the shit out of your competitors. There's a lot of like politics in the background as well. So that has been fairly interesting.
Nice. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to new series recommendations. Hits, have you caught any of Jujutsu Kaisen?
No, I have not.
Okay, so Jujutsu Kaisen is the most hyped anime at the moment, and
I have seen it a lot. Yeah.
yeah, with good reason. I think like it is a fairly it's a fairly modern take. I think on it's got the same vibes as Demon Slayer, right? So
Mm.
essentially, you follow Yuji Itadori, who is a member of his high school occult club. Oh, I almost
Mm-hmm.
said adult club. That's a totally different. That's totally different show. Yeah, and he kind of spends his days together with his seniors investigating paranormal things, um, and spending his evenings visiting his bedridden grandfather.
Yep.
His life takes a strange turn when he unknowingly encounters a cursed items that he happens to find upon his school grounds. This triggers a whole slew of supernatural events, which ends up with him swallowing the cursed object, which happens to be a finger.
Oh wow.
Uh,
How does he swallow? Well, never mind. I don't spoil.
Yeah,
It's okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he basically finds himself thrust into the strange world of sorcery and curses, right? So Jujutsu Kaisen is basically about his story as he learns to adapt to his new life as a jujutsu practitioner, basically someone who uses curses, um, to and gives you supernatural power, right? It is a very, very well animated series with some amazing soundtracks, I have to say. The action is clean, the world building is fascinating, the characters still need a bit of time to develop, but it has kind of all the hallmarks of something that could be very, very good. I'm very excited to see where it goes. Currently, it is at episode 8. We are a third through the season, and I have to say that so far from what uh, we've seen, Sorcery Fight might actually end up, ranking up there with your Demon Slayer and your My Hero Academia and so on and so forth. If it doesn't like take a dip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the hype is real, and I'm totally
Nice.
supporting that for
Good to
sure.
hear, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next up, I want to talk about Moriarty the Patriot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Moriarty the Patriot is basically a new spin on Sir Arthur
The,
Conan Doyle's work about Sherlock, but this time around we're going to put the spotlight on the antagonist instead. It's the late 19th century. The British Empire has become a global power. right?
Yep.
Britain is under the rule of strict class stratification, with the nobles at the top and everybody else below. William James Moriarty, who is a young mathematics professor, uh, has a side hustle as the consultant of crime, basically. And we kind of see his adventures, misadventures, and his scheming as he goes through trying to topple the ruling class. Most interestingly, in the latest episode, they just introduced Sherlock
Hmm.
character, which has been pretty interesting. I'm very, very curious to see what take they have on their relationship. Obviously, to me, the most iconic Moriarty Sherlock dynamic was the one in the BBC one with Cumberbatch and, oh no, what's the guy who plays Moriarty?
Hot priest.
Yes, Hot Priest.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? That is one of the
Yeah.
most compelling kind of like protagonist antagonist relationship in a Sherlock Holmes story that I've ever seen. So I'm really curious to see where it goes.
Hmm.
It's very, very compelling watch. It really is feels very accurate to the time that they're setting it in 19th century England. There's a lot of attention to detail in terms of the way that they dress, the things that they refer to, and a lot of the set pieces are kind of surround that. So highly recommend Moriarty the Patriot. And we
Nice.
go into kind of like the notable mentions, things that I mean I found interesting and enjoyable, but aren't necessarily like great to watch. One of it is going
Okay.
to be Akudama Drive. So basically, this takes place in a Neo Japan in the future, where something an event has occurred that has split Japan into two. So basically, you have your Kanto region and you have your Kansai region,
Okay.
right? And this has occurred because of a war that broke out between the two factions. Within this world, you have criminals who are superpowered called Akudama. Essentially, it is it is a heist series set in like a Blade Runner world, essentially, right? But I'm
Hmm.
recommending this in particular because wow, the animation is pretty sick. I really, really have to say. Like the way everything looks and feels is straight out of like Altered Carbon, Blade Runner, and all of that. There are
Yep.
moments in time in which I feel like they put more thought and detail into the background scenes than they actually do with the characters themselves, which can be
Hmm.
kind of a bit jarring. But all in all, it's a pretty fun romp if you're into heist things, and you kind of like the whole like thematic future look of Blade Runner and Altered Carbon. I think this one is for you.
Awesome. Okay.
I'm gonna talk about Noblesse, which is an adaptation from a Korean manhwa. So if you haven't gotten your Bishonen vampire fix
Oh, yeah.
in a while, then Noblesse is it for you. And to be very honest, like, I mean, we've talked about Helsing and all of that, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think we've really gotten like a fairly interesting like vampire one. In Sirius the Jaeger was okay in my opinion. I
Okay.
didn't rate it that well, but Noblesse is an incredibly popular manhwa that just recently got turned into the anime itself. I
Mm.
recommend it for no other reason than it has some amazing fight scenes, like really,
Okay.
really good fight scenes that are spotted throughout kind of like the slice of life of this 820-year-old like pure blood vampire trying to adjust to high school life, right? Which is funny in its own way, but it's not the first time it's been done.
Yep.
But the fight sequences really have been quite mind blowing and is a bit jarring sometimes too, because it doesn't transition very well between your whole slice of life thing and the greater kind of plot behind it. But yeah,
Hmm.
so if you want Bishonen vampire boys and girls, fighting it out, while trying to live a high school life, then Noblesse is it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
So is this a Korean show or is this a
No,
Japanese
so it
production?
was a Korean manhwa that got turned into a Japanese production.
Oh, so the anime is made by Japanese animators lah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So the thing is, Noblesse the manhwa is so popular
Yeah.
that this anime adaptation is done by Production IG.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah,
Wow.
so when I
Oh.
yeah, so that's the kind of caliber of fight scenes that we're talking about. Yeah,
Mm.
all in all, like it's kind of a meh story. I don't think it's gone anywhere it's gone anywhere necessarily great at the moment, other than the fight scenes. But there is no set amount of episodes at the moment, right? And the whole Noblis manhwa, I think, is going into, I don't know. There are several hundred chapters, I think, if I'm not wrong.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there's a potential for this to kind of get fairly interesting. Um, there have been kind of detractors because it really follows like the whole shonen power up arc to a
Hmm.
fault. But we'll see. We'll see. I production IG rarely picks up something unless they really think it's worth putting time into. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Um, on a more lighthearted note, I want to talk about the Wandering Witch: The Journey of Elena, which feels like a slightly more grown-up version of Little Witch Academia, which is one of my favorite animes, kind of like slice of life animes.
It's on Netflix now.
Yeah, Little Witch Academia. Yeah, so Journey of Elena, basically it's about a girl who read a book about a witch who traveled and decided that she wanted to be a witch as well.
Yep.
And it's kind of a very interesting series following her journey from how she became a witch to all the various strange, wonderful, terrifying places in her world that she visits, and the people that she meets, and how they ultimately change their life and she changes theirs. Um, it's a very calm, easy, breezy watch. Occasionally thought provoking, which is surprising given how it was. But I'm really kind of enjoying this as a just a easy, calming thing to watch at the moment. Aside from all the action stuff that's going on.
Cool. Yeah, a bit of a respite,
Yeah.
a dessert palate cleanser.
And
Yeah.
last one I'm going to talk about is actually a mini series. It was supposed to be released as a movie, but it's only 3 episodes, and it's called Burn the Witch, which is based off or adapted off of a one shot from the guy who made Bleach.
Oh, okay.
Right, so this takes place in the London equivalent of Soul Society, right?
Okay.
Which is dominated. It's called Reverse London and is dominated by dragons. So we follow two witches who are basically their job is to deal with the dragons, right? Both Noelle and Nini, and
Yep.
they're supposed to be protecting Reverse London from the dragons itself. It's kind of I mean, it doesn't give you the complete story. The world building isn't entirely like thorough in any sort of way. Again, this was a one shot. It only had one chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, it's been pretty interesting. The artwork is very reminiscent of early Bleach, but with a slight update. So if you're kind of like into that and you're kind of like the nostalgia of that, this Burn the Witch is really really good.
Nice.
Yeah, the story takes place over 3 chapters, and I think it gives you enough, right, of a peek into what an alternative soul society would look like. So instead of what we get in Soul Society with the Shinigami and all of that, we get witches and dragons instead, which apparently are more culturally, apt for the geolocation that it's in. I really did quite
Okay.
enjoy it. It's a very quick, easy, like it's an hour and 10 minutes, I think, in total for all these
Mm.
episodes. And for fans of Bleach, it doesn't really have direct relation to that, but it did remind me a lot of it. So I had a good time with that.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, of all the shows you mentioned, like obviously Jujutsu Kaisen is on the top of the list lah, for me to watch just because of the hype. I got a bit of FOMO there, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that one out.
Yeah, Jujutsu Kaisen, like I really really think like it has a lot of potential. I don't think there hasn't been any missteps so far. Just in terms
Yep.
of the pacing and all of that, which is a pretty high bar. I think like Demon Slayer has set the bar in terms of like what an anime season's pacing should be like.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Still fairly early into the season, only a third of the way through.
Hmm.
But for me, a good indication of that is just like they've got some of the really popular voice actors on it.
Yeah.
So it's looking promising. It's looking promising.
Nice. And to cap off this week's episode, couple of two things left. Besides pull list, I'm going to eulogize a bit lah, about the a very long running show, Supernatural. As it stands right now, Supernatural has 15 seasons under its belt. Its finale just at this week, as of this recording. And it is actually the longest running genre series in American broadcast TV, if you can believe it.
Damn.
Not in the world though. The longest running in the world is Doctor Who,
Mm-hmm.
which has been running since the 50s or 60s. So yeah, I don't think anything will be able to beat that. But in terms of American broadcast TV, Supernatural is it lah. I once frequently joked that Supernatural would outlive us all. And I've spent like a considerable amount of time over the last few months, especially considering what the legacy of the show might have been if it had ended after season five, which was the culmination of the original series' Angels and Demons arc, as
Yep.
planned by series creator Eric Kripke. Eric Kripke also is now the showrunner of The Boys, so he's doing well. But the first five seasons were undoubtedly great television. It told an almost perfect story, and
Uh-huh.
its finale, season five finale, Swan Song, was such a perfect series finale that I had wished at the time that Supernatural had just ended there.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that season five went on to season 15, and the fact that every season of its initial five-season run, it was perennially on the bubble. It had so many obstacles to overcome. It was on the verge of being cancelled every season. Season three was cut in half because of the writers' strike. And in the middle of its initial five-season run, its network, the WB,
Yep.
um, folded. The WB merged with the UPN to create CW,
Uh-huh.
and Supernatural was not a given to go across.
Really?
Supernatural was one of the shows on the bubble that the CW didn't want to pick up because it wasn't doing well. And considering what it's become for the CW, I'm sure they're glad they made the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the first five seasons were kind of this near perfect blend of absurdist comedy and compelling mythology and complicated family angst and daring contemplations of free will. There are instant classic episodes around every corner, especially after season three. When the show really started finding its footing. It was a great 5 season span, one of the most memorable things. But going on into season six, after completing that heavily serialized, exceptionally successful arc, which seemed at the time to be the pinnacle of its narrative, the
Yep.
the, the show being forced into season six had like new mountains to climb. Old school fans such as myself will obviously be comparing it to the first five seasons. Thereafter, and it becomes clear that there are two versions of Supernatural. There is the Supernatural that exists from season 1 to 5 when I was an ardent fan,
Uh-huh.
and the Supernatural from season 6 to 15 when it caught on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's bizarre because season 6 to 15, even the current Supernatural fans who have gone back to watch season 1 and 5 would recognize that 6 to 15 are not great seasons, lah,
Yeah.
not the best. So it's bizarre that like its viewership has kind of ballooned and it's become this pop cultural phenomenon in the seasons when it wasn't that good. Um, so yeah, I mean that's what I think about Supernatural. Like, it's had a kind of bizarre arc.
Yep.
But that being said, there are certain aspects of its legacy from season 6 to 15 that can be fondly remembered by fans and critics alike. Because I think Supernatural continued to grow in popularity over the years, and the fact that it was able to deliver so many creatively ambitious episodes like Scooby Natural, which was the crossover with Scooby Doo, or the one where Dean finds himself in like Gilmore Girls, alternate reality, things
Yeah.
like this. Like it's testament to the overall strength and creative writing stuff and its genre bending genius. But its legacy is also more complicated now. For every great episode there are multiple episodes that are probably best forgotten,
Uh-huh.
and the longer the show goes on, the more opportunities there are for mistakes and missteps. Supernatural has certainly made a few mistakes and missteps along the way, but I guess much like the characters at the center, the show overcame, seemingly impossible odds to come out more resilient on the other side. For 15 years, I feel like Supernatural has been like this reliable and steady pot in a storm of change. The television landscape has changed a lot in 15 years, and it is a constant companion. And it felt like a bit like a security blanket that I guess its fans could turn to whenever they needed to be reassured that despite the the shifting landscapes of television, there was always going to be a supernatural.
Yeah.
There was always going to be Sam and Dean and a path forward. It became familiar and comforting, like the television equivalent of a, like a bowl of soup on a cold day. I suppose like other people might think of Grey's Anatomy that way. Yeah, it's kind of what supernatural has become. So I guess it's easy to look back and play a game of what if with the show's first undeniably great 5 seasons, the original version that Eric Kripke had for the Winchesters.
Yeah.
What if it ended there? It might have been considered a perfect show, but would it have become the juggernaut that it is today? Probably not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's fair.
yeah,
That's fair.
I mean, like, did you ever watch Supernatural back in the day? During its the quote unquote prime. I know now is the heyday, but back then prime. Yeah.
I followed Supernatural. Okay, I followed it religiously for about, I'm gonna say 2.5 seasons, 3 seasons, and
Mm,
then only like intermittently as and when it came up. And like nothing past that, as far as I can
mm,
remember. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, like it's always kind of been in the news, and once in a while, I just see also like what are the brothers up to now? After like 8 seasons in, 10 seasons in.
indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did find it very compelling when it first started.
Mhm.
But I just kind of like trailed off after that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, same lah. I mean, season 5 felt like just the perfect ending for me, which is when I stopped watching the show religiously, meaning week to week lah.
Yeah.
I did tune in once or twice per season for its special episodes whenever it does a gimmick episode. And whether it was a musical, whether it was an animated episode, it always felt like there were still the glimpses of the original genius there.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's coming rarely lah. Last time season 3, 4, and 5 had those episodes every week. And this
Yeah.
time it's just like one or two a season. But I think at the end of the day, Supernatural has become one of the most iconic, I guess, American genre shows in history.
Yeah.
Probably even outstripping things like Buffy and everything, just because of its longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes at a precarious time for the CW. With the end of Arrow, and the end of Supernatural. These are two like of their legacy shows,
Yeah.
right? So like are they going to be able to create the new Arrow? Are they going to be able to create the new Supernatural? It doesn't seem so. I feel like as much as we enjoy Legends and Supergirl and things like that, they just haven't been able to catch on in the same way that Arrow and Supernatural has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
certainly Black Lightning hasn't. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it might be the end of the era, not just for Supernatural, but for CW as a place for as a genre destination.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's genre destination. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like basically, the CW right now, well, as of last year, like it was the Supernatural and Berlanti verse the DC verse channel. That's what it's known for. What is it without them, right? I don't think it will be as big anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, like it's nice to do a little retrospective. Although we're not huge fans anymore, certainly like a long legacy that the show has, and we thought we'd do like a small retrospective on it lah.
Mm-hmm.
And right at the end, right now, I'm going to be talking about a graphic novel. This is part of the pull list. This is where I recommend reading material to you guys. This is called The Magic Fish. It is by Trung Lee Nguyen, who is one of my favorite artists. He's a stunning illustrator that has built a huge following online.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a fan of comics, you probably read some of his stories in anthologies like Twisted Romance or 1001 Nights or Fresh Romance. Maybe you saw some of Nguyen's amazing covers for comic book series like Adventure Time
Mm-hmm.
or Lumberjanes and things like that. But if you've yet to discover his dream-like art, you're in for a treat, because The Magic Fish is the cartoonist's debut graphic novel, and it's nothing short of spectacular. This is a sprawling yet intimate story that juxtaposes fairy tales and the everyday to tell the story of Tien, who is a young boy trying to work out how to tell his parents that he's gay.
Uh-huh.
Le Nguyen crafts a tale here that is both hopeful and bittersweet, a moving tale of family, immigration, and coming out. There's plenty to love here, there's plenty to digest here. The cartoonist spins glittering fantasy yarns that spill in and out of Tien's everyday life, slowly changing and evolving as he does. So while he fills his days at school with friends and schoolwork and a burgeoning crush,
Uh-huh.
at home, Tian and his parents communicate through the language of fairy tale stories that he borrows from the library. With these stories, he hopes to bridge the gap between the Vietnamese words he can't quite find to tell his parents the truth about who he is. The power of stories is key as Tien and his parents traverse growing up through the medium of books. The fact that the magic fish holds a powerful message that could change the life of those who read it adds layers to the particular thematic exploration. This book could change a particular young gay boy's life in the same way that it changes Tien's life. As he reads other books.
Mm-hmm.
As children, we rarely heard loving and thoughtful stories about queerness or coming out. Pretty much every story dripped with trauma and unhappy endings, or on the flip side, on the Disney side, just straight heterosexual happy endings.
Yeah.
The Magic Fish offers readers happiness and magic while still feeling completely authentic and real, especially from the Southeast Asian context for us. It's hard to put into words how well Leng Yuan translates his skills as an illustrator to a long form sequential storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
To mold the multiple stories, both fantastical and intimately familiar, around Tian's journey of self discovery requires a deft hand, and it's a talent that Leng Yuan clearly showcases. The Magic Fish moved me to tears multiple times upon my first reading, not just by Tian's story, which is the heart of the book, but also his mother's story. Leng Yan gives her a rare whole arc that brings an extra layer of complexity and nuance to the tale. So it's not just about the boy, it's about the mother too. Then there are the emotive fairy tales that surround the real world and the immersive prettiness of the artist's art lah. The Magic Fish is truly stunning. It's a book that doesn't look or read like anything else, and it tells a vital and powerful story with an unexpectedly light and charming touch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an 8 out of 10. You can buy it at Kinokuniya if you're in Singapore, or order it on Amazon, or go to your local comic book store to get this.
Yeah.
Highly recommended that you read the Magic Fish.
Yeah. I'm definitely putting that down. That sounds great.
Nice. Yeah. Anyways, let's cover what we are going to do next month. Boy, December is going to be a mad packed month, particularly because there are two major big blockbuster movies that are being released on Christmas Day
Uh-huh.
on HBO Max and on Disney Plus. Firstly, it's Soul, Pixar's highly anticipated new animated film about the jazz pianist who goes to the afterlife. There is also Wonder Woman 1984 being released on HBO Max on December 25th. So two big Christmas Day specials that we'll be covering. Plus, there is The Mandalorian, which caps off its season in December.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be talking about the latest season of Big Mouth as well. And there's a movie that I particularly want Isa to watch. It's an Irish animated movie called Wolfwalkers, which I'll be passing
Ooh.
along to him shortly. That is, I feel like, one of the best movies of the year, animated or not. So yeah, those are our big topics. Mandalorian, Wonder Woman, Soul, Big Mouth. These are huge
Yeah.
titles, man.
Is
Yeah.
Wonder Woman confirmed?
Wonder Woman is confirmed for HBO Max.
Okay.
It will be released simultaneously on HBO Max and theaters, which is making film distributors extremely angry,
Ah.
because you
Yeah.
have the option of watching it online lah.
Yeah.
But the other option is just pushing it back another year, in the same way like Dune has been pushed back to December 2022,
Yep.
right? So like Wonder Woman has decided to not do that. So it's interesting. This is the first real big blockbuster that is going to go through VOD. Or streaming. Yeah, I mean they have released some movies, but mostly they've been animated. Mostly they've been like nothing like this, and nothing to the scale of Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Right.
That will be released on streaming. So it's an interesting experiment. I wonder whether it will work. I'm sure it will.
I think
There's a
so.
lot of hype. There's a lot of hype around 1984, and I'm sure HBO Max will get like a ton of new subscribers because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, just okay. What blockbusters have we had released on VOD?
Mm,
Mulan, I guess.
Mulan, yeah, yeah,
Right. So Tenet was cinema only, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, like, people, the industry is just trying all ways and means to see what works and what sticks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fairly bold move to do both at the same time.
Mm,
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, it could swing in either direction, really.
definitely, man. Yeah. So lots to talk about. Mando, Wonder Woman 1984, Soul,
Yeah.
Wolfwalkers, Big Mouth, and those are just our main topics, man. Anyways, we'll catch you next month, and we'll be back next week for a new episode of Behold, where we'll be talking about some of our favorite new shows, whether it be online shows or streaming shows or TV shows that have popped up in 2020.
Yep.
So till next time, this is Hit Zero.
I'm myself.
Goodbye,
Ciao.
guys.